The sky was bleeding again. The clouds above Varanth Prime churned in crimson spirals, electric veins pulsing through them like the dying heart of a god. Wind screamed across the battlefield, scattering ash and feathers in a storm of ruin. Captain Karin Vela crouched behind a slab of shattered hull plating, her breath sharp and metallic in her throat. The plasma spear in her hands hummed weakly, its energy core sputtering with the last of its charge. The weapon had served her through 20 campaigns, 3 mutinies, and 100 duels of honor. Now it trembled like a dying thing, whining its last before the crystal chamber cracked with a brittle snap. The blue light guttered out. The hum faded. The spear was dead. Karin stared at the weapon, her talons tightening until they drew blood. The sound of the enemy's war drums carried through the smoke, slow, deliberate, the rhythm of the skyclaws advancing. Around her, the bodies of her warriors lay broken. The few still breathing leaned on makeshift blades, wings tattered, feathers scorched. "Captain," one rasped, his voice thick with dust and shame. "We are surrounded." She already knew. Her visor display pulsed with hundreds of enemy signatures, converging in a tightening ring. Her warriors had fought bravely, as Skyfangs always did. But bravery was a finite thing, and the plasma storms above had eaten their reinforcements alive. She could taste ozone in the air, the storm brewing close again, but even the heavens seemed to mock them. Karin rose, letting the broken halves of her spear fall into the dirt. The act was sacrilege. A warrior's weapon was their soul, and to lose it in battle meant dying without honor. Yet there was no time for ceremony, no time to carve her farewell markings into her armor. She straightened, shoulders wide, feathers flaring in defiance. "Then we die standing," she said. The remaining Skyfangs lifted their heads, eyes reflecting the dim light of burning wrecks. Some hissed softly. The old sound of agreement. They moved into a circle around her, talons scraping metal and stone, as the first wave of Skyclaw infantry emerged from the smoke. The enemy marched in perfect formation, shields crackling with energy, their crests painted black for victory. The first volley came like rain. Plasma bolts sliced through the haze, searing blue trails through the air. Karin ducked, rolled, grabbed a fallen blade. It was heavy and dull, a scavenged weapon from a dead enemy, but it would serve for one last strike. She launched herself forward with a screeching cry, the kind that once made whole armies falter. The blade connected with armor, sparks flew, a skyclaw fell, gurgling. But for every one that fell, 5 more took its place. She fought until her limbs burned. Every movement became slower, heavier, her muscles screaming under her armor. Her visor cracked from a glancing strike. Through the fracture, she saw her warriors collapsing one by one. The circle was closing, and there was no sky left above, only smoke and thunder. She could hear the whine of charging rifles, the hiss of plasma priming. This was it. Her end. The end of Skyfang. She drew herself to full height, feathers slick with blood and soot, chest heaving. If death came, it would find her unbowed. Her talons clenched around the useless blade, her crest raised high in defiance. "Come, then," she roared. "Let your gods witness how the Skyfang die." And then, the heavens screamed. A sound split the air like the sky itself being torn open. Every warrior froze, Ketheri and Skyclaw alike. Above them, the clouds burned with light. Something blazed through the atmosphere, trailing fire and smoke. The formation wavered as a thunderous shockwave rolled across the battlefield, scattering dust and debris. Karin lifted her head, eyes narrowing against the glare. For a moment, she thought it was a weapon strike, an orbital bombardment, perhaps. But the light didn't fall like a weapon. It tumbled. It fought gravity. Then she saw it, a vessel, small and battered, twisting violently as it plunged through the storm layer. Metal screamed as it tore against the wind. Flames wrapped around its hull, painting streaks of molten gold against the red sky. The Skyclaws shouted in confusion, firing up into the air, but the shots went wide. The ship slammed into the ground between the two armies, the impact hurling Karen backward. The explosion came a heartbeat later, a bloom of blue-white fire that swallowed half the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, silence fell, the kind that feels alive, waiting to see what happens next. Karen pushed herself up, coughing, armor scorched. The wreck of the ship lay in a smoking crater, pieces of metal still hissing with heat. Through the haze, a hatch burst open with a metallic groan. A figure climbed out, stumbling, brushing ash from his face. He was short, barely her shoulder height, and wore armor that looked like it had been built from scrap. His movements were clumsy but deliberate. He lifted a strange weapon, not quite a rifle, not quite a tool, and looked around as if this were merely an inconvenience. Karen blinked. His face was smooth, almost soft, his eyes bright and alive. Human, she realized, recalling the word from intercepted transmissions. One of the skyborne scavengers from the outer colonies. He turned, saw her standing amid the ruin, and grinned. "Hell of a landing," he said, his words clipped and strange, filtered through his translator. "You look like you could use a hand." Karen's crest flickered in disbelief. You fell from the sky," she rasped. "Yeah," the human said, shrugging. He glanced at the encircling skyclaws, then back at her, as if weighing a simple choice. He adjusted the strap on his weapon, exhaled, and smiled with a kind of reckless ease that made no sense in the middle of death. "Mind if I join the fight?" For a heartbeat, she simply stared at him. This absurd, fragile creature, smoke still rising from his armor, daring to grin at the end of the world. Then the war drums started again. Plasma fire lit the air. And Karen, spearless and exhausted, found herself nodding. The human cracked his knuckles and stepped forward into the storm. The ground still trembled from the crash. Heat waves shimmered across the battlefield, turning the air into liquid glass. Karen's hearing returned in distorted fragments, crackling fire, distant shouting, the metallic buzz of damaged comlinks. Her vision struggled to focus through the dust and plasma haze. The human moved first. He stepped down from the wreckage with the loose swagger of someone too stubborn to die, shaking sparks from his arm like they were raindrops. He wore no crest, no symbol of allegiance, just a charred flight suit with patches of metal plating welded over it. Every inch of him looked improvised, half-built, and yet somehow functional. He scanned the terrain with quick, practiced eyes, then crouched beside a fallen Ketheri. Without hesitation, he pulled a small device from his belt, twisted a dial, and pressed it against the warrior's chest. A soft hum filled the air. The wounded soldier gasped, feathers twitching as the bleeding slowed. The human muttered something under his breath, words she didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, impatience mixed with grim focus. Karen took a cautious step closer. The enemy line was reforming beyond the wreckage, their ranks glowing in the smoky light. The Skyclaws hadn't fled, they were regrouping, preparing to charge again. She could see Commander Tolvek's banners rising through the haze, the black insignia gleaming like obsidian wings. The human looked up at her, his face streaked with soot. "You planning to stand there," he said, "or do we make this interesting?" Her feathers flared with irritation at his tone, but before she could reply, the first Skyclaws opened fire. Bolts of blue plasma streaked toward them, slamming into the wreck's twisted hull. The human dove behind cover with a curse, motioning for her to do the same. She followed on instinct. Energy crackled overhead, melting shards of debris into molten spray. "Who are you?" she shouted over the noise. "Elias," he yelled back, fumbling with a small cylindrical device. "Engineer. Pilot. Occasional disaster." Karen blinked, uncomprehending. "Why are you here?" Short answer. He popped the device open. Inside was a tangle of wires and a glowing core. "Wrong coordinates." Long answer. "Hold that thought." He tossed the device out into the open. It bounced once, twice, then detonated in a flash of white light. The shockwave threw several skyclaws off their feet, their energy shields flickering. Elias sprang from cover, firing his blaster in short, precise bursts. Karin stared, astonished by the way he moved, no formation, no rhythm, just chaos wrapped in confidence. He ducked, rolled, fired again, laughing under his breath like this was all some insane game. Karin's warrior instincts roared back to life. She grabbed the fallen blade she dropped and charged, her movement sharp and measured where his was wild and erratic. She struck high while he fired low. Their unspoken rhythm clashed and fused, alien precision meeting human improvisation. A skyclaw lunged for Elias with a spear of his own. The human sidestepped awkwardly, let the weapon pierce a pile of debris, then kicked the alien square in the chest. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Karin drove her blade through another enemy's shoulder, sparks hissing as blood met plasma. Between them, the tide shifted. Elias ducked behind her mid-swing, shouting something about flanking fire. Karin didn't understand half of his words, but she understood intent. She pivoted, driving her elbow into an attacker's jaw while Elias threw another of his strange grenades, this one emitting a pulse that collapsed several shields at once. They fought until the smoke thickened again, until the last line of skyclaws hesitated. Karin could hear their commanders barking orders, trying to reform ranks. For the first time in this doomed battle, she saw confusion in their movements. They didn't know how to read this, how to anticipate a human's madness. Then came the second wave. Dozens of armored warriors surged from the flank, plasma halberds raised. Karin's breath hitched, her muscles ached, armor cracked. They couldn't hold another assault. Elias crouched beside her, panting, grinning through blood-streaked teeth. How many left? Too many, she hissed. Good, he said. Makes it fair. Before she could argue, he dashed forward again, weaving through plasma bolts with impossible timing. He wasn't fast, he was unpredictable, every movement born from some mad improvisation. He snatched a broken skyclaw rifle, fired it once before it overloaded, then hurled it into a cluster of enemies. It exploded midair, sending shards through their ranks. Karin followed him, unwillingly drawn into his rhythm, fighting not beside him but with him. Her blade cracked another helm, severed a weapon shaft. Feathers scorched, armor melting, she moved like a creature possessed. Elias's laughter cut through the chaos, wild, human, utterly alive. Told you this'd be interesting. When the last skyclaw stumbled back, Karin drove her knee into his chest and threw him to the dirt. The battlefield fell silent except for the crackle of burning metal. Smoke curled skyward in lazy spirals. Her lungs burned, her feathers were blackened, and her body screamed for rest. Yet somehow, impossibly, they were still standing. Elias dropped beside a wrecked pod, tearing off his cracked helmet. His hair was damp with sweat, his grin undimmed. You fight well for a bird, he said between gasps. She stiffened. And you fight like a storm with no direction. He looked up at her, still smiling. Storms get things done. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the smell of ozone and blood. Karin studied him, this strange, fragile being who fell from the heavens and turned a hopeless defeat into something unthinkable, survival. His armor was scorched, his weapon half melted, yet he radiated something she couldn't name. It wasn't discipline or honor. It was will. Far in the distance, the war drums started again. Reinforcements. She glanced toward the sound, then back at him. They will return soon, she said quietly. We cannot stay. Elias holstered his blaster, eyeing the horizon. Then we find higher ground, he said. You've got the wings, I've got the ship, well, what's left of it? Between us, maybe we make it out alive. Karin tilted her head. Why help me? He shrugged, brushing dust from his suit. Because you're still breathing. And because it's more fun fighting with company. She didn't know whether to laugh or strike him. Instead, she turned toward the rising smoke, her feathers shifting in the wind. The crimson sky loomed above, rumbling with thunder. Together, they began to move. Behind them, the wreck still burned, a beacon in the dark, marking the moment when two species met not as enemies, but as survivors standing shoulder to shoulder beneath a dying sun. The wind howled through the ravine, dragging trails of ash and sparks between the jagged cliffs. Karen led the way, her talons scraping against blackened stone, every step sending echoes down the narrow pass. Behind her, the human stumbled occasionally, his boots sliding on loose gravel. He carried a metal case slung over one shoulder and a blaster in the other hand, scanning the shadows like he expected the rocks themselves to attack. The plasma glow from the burning wreck behind them still painted the horizon, a wounded sun against the storm-dark sky. They had moved for hours without a word. Karen's body ached with every breath, but her mind refused to rest. Her warriors were gone. Her clan's banners burned. All that remained of Skyfang honor was a single broken blade, and the strange offworlder who walked at her side. She could hear him muttering occasionally, soft curses in his rough human tongue. His voice was steady, but his rhythm faltered with fatigue. He was fragile, too fragile to belong on a world like this. When the path opened into a wider basin, Karen stopped. The walls around them glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss, and somewhere deep in the earth, she could hear the hum of ancient power conduits, remnants of the old Kethri empires that had ruled before the clans turned on each other. "We rest here," she said finally. Elias dropped the case beside a rock, breathing hard. "You sure? Not exactly 5-star accommodations." She frowned. "I do not know what that means." "Good," he said, sitting down anyway. He rummaged through the case, pulling out a few small devices, a cracked datapad, a canteen, and a compact tool that hummed when activated. "Power cells nearly fried. I can rig it for heat or comms, not both." "Heat," she said at once. He nodded, twisting the tool until it emitted a soft orange glow. Warmth spread through the air, flickering against the cave walls. Karen crouched opposite him, wings folded close, watching as he took a sip from his canteen and then offered it to her. She hesitated. The gesture was too casual, too familiar. Among Kethri, sharing water was a warrior's oath. He tilted the canteen toward her. "You need it more than I do." She took it, drank, and handed it back without comment. The water tasted of metal and strange minerals, but it steadied her throat. For a while, they sat in silence, the storm outside echoing faintly through the rocks. Finally, Elias broke it. "You've got some kind of rank, right? The way the others followed you." "I was captain of the Skyfang Third Wing," she said. The title felt heavy now, meaningless. "There is no wing left to command." He studied her, eyes reflecting the soft light. "That's rough. But you're still breathing. That's a start." Karen's crest flicked upward, a reflex of irritation. "You think survival is honor enough?" "Honor's a luxury," he said. "Survival's the job." She leaned forward slightly. "Among my people, dying in battle for your clan is the highest duty. To live after defeat," her voice trailed off. "It is shame." Elias snorted softly. "Sounds exhausting. Where I come from, living through a bad day just means you get to fix what broke." She tilted her head, unsure if he mocked her or not. His tone wasn't cruel, just simple, like a truth spoken too easily. "Your kind fights without honor." "We fight to win," he said. "And to make sure the next fight's easier than the last." He poked at the glowing tool, watching sparks drift upward. "If we cared that much about dying well, we wouldn't have made it off our first planet." Karen said nothing, but her feathers rippled uneasily. His words clashed with everything she'd been taught, yet something about them felt alive, like a challenge she couldn't dismiss. Outside, thunder rolled across the ravine. In the distance, lights flickered, patrol beacons moving along the ridge. The Skyclaws were still searching. Elias noticed them too. He reached into the case, pulled out a small lens device, and held it to his eye. "They're sweeping with drones," he murmured. 5, maybe 6 minutes before they spot us. Karen stood. "Then we move." "Wait." He held up a hand, rummaging through his pack again. "There's another way." She watched as he pulled out a strip of metal from the wreckage and began wiring it to his blaster's power cell. Sparks flew as he worked, muttering to himself, "If I can overcharge the core, we can light up that ridge long enough to blind their sensors." "You'll destroy your weapon," she warned. "Yeah," he said, grinning faintly, "but it'll look impressive." Before she could protest, he flicked the switch. The makeshift device whined, vibrating with unstable energy. He threw it toward the ridge, and a second later, the night exploded in white light. The patrol lights flared, blinded by the sudden flash. Elias grabbed her wrist and pulled her deeper into the ravine before the shockwave faded. When they finally stopped, hidden behind a wall of jagged stone, she turned on him sharply. "You could have killed us both." "Could've," he admitted. "Didn't." Her talons flexed against the rock. "You act without discipline, without reason. How do your people survive your recklessness?" He wiped soot from his cheek, still smiling. "Because sometimes, chaos works better than rules." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of ozone and burnt metal. Karen stared at him for a long moment, seeing something she didn't understand, a mind that thrived on uncertainty, that bent destruction into opportunity. "You are strange," she said at last. "Been told that before," he replied. She looked up toward the burning sky, the faint glow of her homeworld's shattered moon reflecting in her eyes. "The war will not end tonight," she murmured. "But something has changed." Elias leaned against the stone, exhausted but grinning. "Yeah," he said. "For once, I think we both lived through a bad idea." Their laughter, hers rough and hesitant, his bright and careless, echoed together through the ravine, fading into the endless storm. Dawn crawled slowly across the storm horizon, a dim smear of red light barely piercing the thick clouds. The world below it remained gray, wet, and trembling. Karen moved through the wreckage of an old Skyfong outpost, her feathers still damp from the acid rain that had fallen in the night. The metal ruins hissed quietly, steam rising where moisture met the residual charge of long-dead power conduits. She walked in silence, her blade drawn, every sense alive to the danger that surrounded them. Behind her, Elias followed, boots crunching over brittle ash, one hand holding a small scanner he'd scavenged from his ship. "This place used to be yours, right?" he asked, his voice echoing softly in the hollow wind. Karen didn't look back. "Once. Before the clans tore it apart. It was a forward post for orbital launches." Elias crouched near a shattered control console, brushing off dust. "Looks like they left in a hurry." "They died in a hurry," she said simply. She stopped beside what had once been a command pillar. The Skyfong insignia, 3 intersecting wings carved into metal, was still faintly visible beneath scorch marks. Her talons brushed the surface. For a moment, she said nothing. The silence between them was heavy with memory. Elias stood, tucking the scanner away. "We could make this a shelter. There's structure left, walls, cover, maybe power if I can wake the grid." "Power will draw them," she said. He shrugged. "So will staying out in the open. Pick your poison." She studied him, trying to read the strange calm in his tone. He moved with the same reckless certainty he'd shown in battle, as if danger was a constant companion he'd long since stopped fearing. Finally, she nodded. "Do what you must." He grinned faintly. "That's permission enough for me." While he scavenged through the wreckage, she climbed a nearby ridge of collapsed plating. From there she could see the horizon, black plumes marking distant battles, faint flashes of plasma fire flickering through the haze. The war never stopped. Even the air seemed to hum with the echo of it, an endless vibration that lived in the bones of the planet. Her clan was gone, yet the war went on as if nothing had changed. The realization struck her with dull finality. Elias's voice rose from below. "Hey, Captain. You've still got juice in the conduit." She turned to see him kneeling beside a cracked power line, sparks dancing around his gloves. "Careful," she started, but the warning came too late. The line flared, a bright pulse racing through the ground. He yelped, falling backward, smoke rising from his suit. Karen leapt down, landing beside him. "You fool," she hissed. "You could have been vaporized." He coughed, patting out a small flame on his sleeve. "Yeah, but we've got lights now." The command pillar flickered to life. Faint blue holographic text shimmered above it, cycling through damaged system readouts. The outpost was alive again, barely. Karen stared at the faint glow, feeling something stir in her chest. Not hope, but a distant echo of it. Elias grinned up at her. "See? Told you chaos works sometimes." Before she could reply, the hologram sputtered and shifted. A signal warning flashed, incoming transmission. Karen's eyes widened. "They've found us." Elias pushed himself up, brushing dust from his armor. "Or they're trying to. Can you read it?" She moved to the console, her claws dancing over broken controls. The transmission was encrypted in Skyclaw code. "Military frequency. It's a scouting wing," she said. "2 dropships, 1 ground unit. They will sweep this region within the hour." He exhaled sharply. "Guess we don't have an hour." Karen hesitated. "There is an old tunnel system beneath this outpost. It leads to the canyon rim." Elias nodded. "Perfect. We rig this place to blow and take the tunnels." Her crest rose in alarm. "You would destroy what remains of my people's base." He met her gaze steadily. "You said it yourself, it's dead. But we can make it useful one last time." She looked back at the glowing insignia on the pillar. Once, it had symbolized everything she'd sworn to protect. Now, it was a ghost. Slowly, she nodded. "Do it." Elias grinned again, the kind of grin that had no place in war. "Thought you'd never say that." He set to work, stripping power cells from broken machines, wiring them together with pieces of his own armor. His hands moved fast, confident, as though he'd built 100 bombs before. Karen watched, uncertain whether to admire or fear his skill. "You are too comfortable with destruction," she said. He didn't look up. "Destruction's easy. Surviving it's the hard part." The wind shifted, carrying the distant whine of engines. Karen's feathers bristled. "They're close." Elias snapped the last connector into place and stood. Timer set. "We've got 5 minutes to be gone." They descended into the tunnel mouth beneath the command pillar. The air was cold and damp, the walls lined with corroded cables that glowed faintly as the power grid flickered above. Karen moved quickly, guiding him through the twisting passages. The hum of engines grew louder overhead. Halfway through the tunnels, the ground shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. A deep, rhythmic sound rolled through the earth, the dropship's landing. Karen pushed Elias forward. "Faster." He stumbled, coughing through the smoke. "You sure this leads out?" "Move," she snapped. The explosion hit before either could turn back. A deep roar tore through the tunnels, a wave of heat and noise that hurled them to the ground. The shockwave raced past, followed by the distant collapse of the outpost above. For a long moment, there was nothing but the crackle of fire and the rumble of falling stone. When the air cleared, Elias rolled over, laughing weakly. "You really know how to show a guy the sights." Karen pushed herself up, bruised and shaking. The light from the tunnel's end flickered faintly ahead. "Come," she said. "If they survived, they will pursue us. They emerged onto a high ridge overlooking the valley. Below, smoke rose where the outpost had been, black columns twisting into the red sky. Elias wiped soot from his face, looking down at the ruin. Guess that's one less place for them to regroup. Karen stared at the destruction for a long time. You are reckless, she said quietly. But effective. He smiled, glancing at her. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. For the first time, she didn't correct him. The wind howled across the ridge, carrying the smell of scorched metal and ozone. Together, they turned toward the horizon, where distant lightning crawled through the clouds, another battle waiting beyond the storm. The ridge fell away into a valley of ruins where lightning crawled across the ground instead of the sky. Each flash lit the remnants of an ancient city, spire husks, broken domes, streets fused into glass by centuries of war. Karen descended first, wings half spread to keep balance against the fierce wind. Elias followed, sliding down a slope of blackened sand, coughing through the electric haze. The air here hummed with static, every few seconds, faint arcs danced between the rusted towers. It felt alive, angry, as if the planet itself still remembered every weapon that had scarred it. We should not be here, Karen said. Her voice carried strangely in the charged air. This place was forbidden even before the war. Elias kicked a piece of twisted metal aside. Good. That means no one's looking for us here. She gave him a sharp look. You walk into danger as if you seek it. He smirked. If I didn't, I'd have been dead years ago. They moved through the ruins, careful to avoid the lightning veins that snaked unpredictably across the ground. The faint remains of architecture hinted at something grand, a civilization that had built too high and fallen too hard. Karen touched one of the scorched walls, her claws tracing the faded etchings of old Ketheri script. The first feathermakers lived here, she murmured. Before the clans. Before the schism. Elias knelt beside a shattered pillar, studying the markings. You sound like you remember them. They were legends, she said. Builders of the skybridges. They reached the stars long before we learned to kill each other for them. He looked around at the destruction. Guess some things don't change, no matter the species. Her crest twitched, uncertain whether his tone carried mockery or understanding. Before she could respond, his scanner began to beep softly. He frowned, tapping the display. I'm picking up an energy signature, steady, not random discharge. Karen's eyes narrowed. There should be nothing living here. Doesn't sound alive. He pointed toward a collapsed structure deeper in the valley. Looks buried, but something still running under the surface. Could be a power core, or a transmitter. She hesitated. It could also be a trap. He shrugged. Then we'll find out the exciting way. He started forward before she could stop him, weaving between shards of fallen metal. Karen followed, muttering a curse in her own tongue. They reached the half-buried building, a dome cracked nearly in half, its interior swallowed by darkness. The air inside buzzed faintly with residual energy. Elias crouched near a junction box, prying it open with a tool from his belt. Sparks flared, lighting his face in pale blue. Karen stood guard at the entrance, scanning the horizon. The sky above had gone unnaturally still, clouds frozen in place as though the storm itself was holding its breath. Her feathers prickled with unease. Hurry, she said. Something feels wrong. Almost got it, he muttered. Just need to reroute. The console came to life with a deafening hum. Light burst through the chamber, projecting a massive holographic map of Varanth Prime. Red lines pulsed across it, current battlefronts. Blue dots glowed where energy sources still lingered. But at the center, a single golden flare pulsed rhythmically. Elias stared. That's a signal relay. Still active. Karen stepped closer, eyes widening. That is the Skyclaw fortress of Talvek. He looked up at her. Your buddy from the battlefield. My enemy, she said. He commands the siege of the northern continent. If that relay is active, he knows we are alive. Before Elias could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep, distorted, unmistakably Ketheri. So the rumors are true, it said. The human survives. The hologram shifted, forming the shape of Commander Talvek himself. His armor gleamed black, his crest spiked high with authority. Even as a projection, his presence filled the air like a blade drawn from its sheath. Karen's wings flared. Talvek. He inclined his head. Karen Vela. You disgrace your fallen with every breath you take beside that creature. His gaze turned toward Elias, unreadable. Human. You intrigue me. Your methods defy logic. You bring chaos where there should be order. I would understand it, perhaps even use it. Elias crossed his arms, unimpressed. Sorry, I don't do job interviews with genocidal birdmen. Talvek's eyes flashed with cold amusement. You misunderstand, off-worlder. You will not choose. You will be captured, studied, and replicated. Karen stepped between them. You will not touch him. Still clinging to honor? Talvek sneered. Your clan is dust. Your traditions mean nothing. But perhaps you have found new faith in this alien's madness. Elias muttered, she's warming up to it. Talvek ignored him. Run if you wish. My hunters are already inbound. I will have you both. The hologram flickered, then vanished, leaving only the hum of ancient machinery. For a moment, neither moved. Then Elias let out a long breath. Well, that was friendly. Karen turned sharply toward the exit. We must leave. Now. Agreed, he said, already packing his tools. But we can use this. She stopped, frowning. Use what? He pointed at the map still hovering faintly above the console. This place is still linked to their comm network. If I can reroute it, we can send a false signal, lead his hunters in the wrong direction. You think you can deceive Talvek's systems? He smirked. Lady, I crashed a ship into a war zone and survived. Lying to a computer's the easy part. She watched him work, hands moving with a rhythm she could never predict, fast, uncertain, yet somehow precise. Within minutes, the hologram flickered again, several of the red markers shifting westward. Elias stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. There. They'll be chasing ghosts for hours. Karen studied the altered map. You are dangerous, she said softly. Only when I'm awake, he replied. Outside, thunder rolled again. The storm had returned, and with it the faint, distant sound of engines, Skyclaw patrols sweeping the ruins. Karen gripped her blade, motioning toward a narrow gap between collapsed towers. This way. They slipped into the storm just as the first searchlights pierced the valley. Lightning illuminated their silhouettes, one tall, winged warrior and one ragged human, running side by side through the wreckage of a dead civilization, hunted by an empire and bound together by something neither could yet name. Rain came down in sheets of molten light, each drop hissing as it struck the scorched ground. The storm above Varanth Prime had turned the sky into a living furnace, every bolt of lightning clawing at the clouds like something furious and alive. Karen and Elias pressed through the downpour, soaked in ozone and grime, following the faint glow of an ancient causeway that led toward the distant mountains. The air was thick with static, their armor and clothing crackled with every step. Elias stumbled on a loose slab of stone but caught himself before he fell. His breath came hard now, too thin for the high atmosphere, too rough for the pace Karen kept. She moved like a shadow, even injured, her balance perfect despite the uneven ground. Her feathers shimmered faintly under the lightning's flash. Every so often she looked back at him, and though her expression remained composed, there was a growing tension in her eyes. We're being tracked, she said suddenly. Elias blinked rain from his face. You sure? Can't hear anything over this weather. I can. Her crest lifted slightly. Their flyers ride the wind. I smell the plasma vents. He cursed under his breath, scanning the skies. Then we need cover. There is none, she said. The ridge ahead leads to the forge plains. Open ground for 20 leagues. Perfect, he muttered. We'll just die in style then. Karen stopped so abruptly he nearly ran into her. No. We fight. Elias stared at her. You serious? There's no high ground, no cover, and they've got air units. She turned, eyes glowing faintly in the stormlight. You said chaos works better than rules. Show me. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then he grinned, tired, reckless, alive. You're really starting to get me, bird lady. He dropped his pack, rummaging through the salvaged parts he'd kept from the ruins. Half-burnt power cells, broken circuit plates, wire mesh, fragments of Skyclaw armor, all useless alone, but together. Maybe not. I need 10 minutes, he said. Karen spread her wings, the wind roaring between them. You have 5. While Elias worked, she strode into the storm, planting the remnants of her spear into the mud. The shaft was cracked, the edge dull, but she held it high as lightning split the air behind her. Her stance was defiant, a lone sentinel daring the sky to strike. Elias stole glances between adjustments, his hands moving faster, weaving cables and fusing metal into a rough circle. Come on, he hissed through gritted teeth. Sparks flared, and a faint hum began to rise from the center of his creation. The first Skyclaw scout appeared as a streak of black against the clouds, its engines screaming through the rain. Plasma fire tore through the ground where Karen had stood a second before. She leapt, wings snapping open, vaulting onto the machine's back as it roared past. Her talons dug into the hull, her blade piercing through the cockpit glass. The craft veered wildly, spiraling into the mud with a burning hiss. Elias cheered, still wiring his device. Nice catch. She didn't respond, already turning toward the next. The air filled with thunder and fire. More ships broke through the storm, their formation tightening as they angled to encircle her. Elias slammed a fist against the control node. Just hold them off. Karen dodged a barrage of plasma bolts, feathers singed by near misses. She landed beside him, wings folding close. Whatever you are doing, do it faster. He grinned, teeth flashing. Done. The contraption lit up, a spinning field of blue arcs rising into the air like a shimmering dome. The Skyclaw flyers closed in, weapons charging, but as they fired, their bolts bent midair, curving toward the magnetic haze Elias had created. Energy struck energy, exploding harmlessly in bursts of light. The field pulsed, expanding outward, distorting the storm itself. Karen stared in disbelief. You built a shield. Not exactly, he said. More like a lightning magnet. A bolt split the sky, striking the dome directly. The field flared brighter, feeding off the charge. Another strike followed, and another, until the entire valley glowed with blinding blue fire. The Skyclaw formation broke apart, pilots panicking as their instruments fried. Elias ducked behind a rock, laughing breathlessly. You wanted chaos, there you go. Karen's laugh came out as a sharp bark, half disbelief, half exhilaration. She charged forward, blade raised, using the cover of the lightning storm to close the distance with the nearest grounded Skyclaw. Her movements were pure fury. Every strike precise, every motion born from years of discipline, yet fueled now by something wild and human. Elias followed, blaster in hand, firing into the chaos. He didn't aim perfectly, he never did, but each shot found a mark anyway, guided by luck or instinct. Together they cut through the disoriented enemy, the storm itself seeming to fight alongside them. When the last Skyclaw fell, silence crashed down, thick, ringing, alive. The rain hissed softly as the lightning began to fade. Karen stood at the center of the carnage, chest heaving, feathers singed and streaked with mud. Elias limped to her side, clutching his shoulder. "Well," he said between breaths, "that was dramatic." She turned to him, eyes burning gold through the mist. "You turned the sky into a weapon." He grinned faintly. "Hey, you said fight." "I just interpreted the brief." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The stormlight danced across their faces, softening the ruin around them. Finally, Karen said quietly, "You are unlike any warrior I have known." "I get that a lot," he said. The horizon flashed again, distant lights moving through the clouds. Not lightning this time. Engines. Karen's wings tensed. Reinforcements. Elias sighed, wiping the rain from his eyes. "Of course. Because why quit while we're ahead?" She looked at him, unreadable. "We cannot keep running forever. Then we make them chase ghosts again." He crouched, adjusting what was left of his storm device. "You buy me 30 seconds. Karen raised her weapon. "I will give you 40. The next wave descended from the clouds, and together they moved, one born from honor, one born from madness, facing the storm head-on as thunder swallowed the sky. Smoke and silence clung to the valley like ghosts after the storm. The ground still steamed where lightning had struck, black glass and molten slag stretching for miles. The air smelled of burnt ozone and blood. Elias sat with his back against a fallen slab of metal, his jacket torn, his arm wrapped in a strip of Karen's cloak. The wound wasn't deep, but it burned like fire every time he moved. He stared at the faint glow of the horizon, dawn creeping through the dust, and wondered if the sun looked the same on her world before it all turned to ash. Karen stood a short distance away, her silhouette sharp against the light. She hadn't spoken since the last wave retreated, driven off or destroyed. Her wings hung heavy at her sides, one bent at an awkward angle from a plasma strike. Even wounded, she carried herself with the cold stillness of a statue carved for war. When she finally turned toward him, the look in her eyes made him sit up straighter. "They will not stop," she said. Her voice was low, edged with exhaustion. "Talvek has seen your face. He will send everything." Elias rubbed a hand through his soaked hair. "So, we keep moving. He can't chase us forever." "He can," she said simply. "And he will." The wind carried a faint whistle across the plain, metal against air. Her head snapped toward the sound. Elias followed her gaze. In the distance, a thin column of smoke rose from the wreck of a fallen Skyclaw flyer. Karen started walking toward it without another word. "Wait, hey, what's the plan?" he called, scrambling up to follow. "Information," she said. "If the craft still holds its core, I can access their network. See how far Talvek's reach extends. Or you could trip some kind of self-destruct and turn us both into glowing fertilizer." She didn't slow down. "Then stay here." He snorted. "Not my style." They reached the wreck within minutes. The craft was half buried, its wings torn away, the cockpit still sparking. Karen climbed atop the hull, talons digging into the scorched plating. She pried open a maintenance panel, exposing a tangled mess of wires and half-melted circuits. Elias joined her, grimacing at the sight. "You sure this thing can talk to anything?" "Not if you keep speaking," she said, pulling a small tool from her belt. Sparks danced as she connected a power line. The cockpit flickered to life, a faint hum echoing through the frame. Symbols scrolled across the cracked display, Skyclaw command code. Elias crouched beside her, frowning. "That their language?" She nodded. "Encrypted. Can you read it?" "Enough." She tapped the interface, and a three-dimensional grid appeared, planetary topography, overlaid with red dots. There were hundreds of them. "These are active search patterns. Talvek has deployed 2 divisions. Elias let out a low whistle. Guy really doesn't take rejection well. Karen's crest lowered. He means to cleanse the region. No survivors. Not even his own scouts. Before Elias could reply, a new signal flashed on the display, gold, pulsing. Karen's eyes widened. That frequency, it is not his. Friend of yours? She hesitated. No. Older. The frequency of the Skyfong archives. My clan's beacon. Elias leaned in. I thought you said your clan was gone. They were, she said, voice tight. But this means something remains. He studied her expression, the flicker of hope fighting against disbelief. Then we go there. It is across the desert, she said. Weeks of flight. My wing, she flexed it, wincing. Is broken. Then we walk. She looked at him like he'd suggested flying to the moon without air. You would cross the burning sands for a signal that may be nothing. He smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the dumbest thing I've done this week. Her gaze lingered on him, uncertain. Finally, she turned back to the display, memorizing the coordinates before cutting power. The cockpit went dark again. Very well, she said. We move east. They set out as the light strengthened, the valley fading behind them. The storm had cleared, leaving the sky a pale, poisonous yellow. For hours they walked in silence, their boots and talons crunching over brittle stone. Occasionally Elias caught her studying him, not suspicion, exactly, but curiosity edged with disbelief, like she still couldn't decide if he was a miracle or a curse. At midday, they reached the edge of the desert. The landscape stretched endlessly, rolling dunes of red sand shimmering with heat. Elias stopped, staring. You sure this isn't, like, instant death to humans? Karen's beak curved slightly. You may die slower if you follow my pace. Comforting, he muttered, adjusting his pack. They descended into the dunes, the heat pressing down like a living thing. Karen moved effortlessly, her body built for thin air and harsh suns. Elias lagged behind, sweat streaking his face, every step sinking deeper than the last. She slowed once, waiting for him to catch up. You are slower than your boasts, she said. He shot her a look. I'm carrying half your toolkit and an atmosphere that wants me dead. Cut me some slack. You complain much. I adapt loudly. A faint smile ghosted across her features, gone almost instantly, but real. Perhaps that is why you live. They walked until the sun bled into the horizon. When they finally stopped, Elias collapsed onto a patch of cool stone. Karen stood nearby, scanning the distance. The desert was quiet, but not empty, faint lights flickered far to the north, moving in formation. Scouts? He asked. Not Skyclaw, she said. Something older. The sands remember machines that never stopped moving. He sighed. Let me guess, more fun for us. Always. She sat beside him, folding her wings carefully. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched until Elias broke it. Back there, when you saw that signal, what did it mean to you? Karen's gaze stayed on the horizon. It means my people may not be extinct. It means the war did not erase everything. Her voice softened, the first hint of something fragile breaking through. And if they still live, they will not forgive what I have done. What, fighting with me? Yes, she said. And surviving. Elias leaned back, staring at the twin moons rising through the dust. Then we make sure survival's worth it. Karen turned to him, her eyes reflecting the moon's light. You speak as if defiance is a creed. He smiled. It's a habit. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of ozone again, the storm wasn't gone after all. Far behind them, the horizon flickered with distant lightning, and above the rolling dunes, something vast moved against the sky. A shape neither of them could yet name. Karen rose slowly, feathers bristling. "They found us again," she whispered. Elias pushed himself to his feet, jaw tightening. "Then let's make them regret it." The storm came crawling across the desert like a living beast, and together they turned toward it, ready once more to fight the impossible. The storm swallowed the horizon in a tide of crimson sand and flashing light. Every grain felt charged with energy, dragging against Karen's feathers like static fire. She pressed forward into the wind, eyes narrowed, scanning the haze for the source of the sound she'd heard, a low mechanical thrum that wasn't thunder. Elias followed close behind, one arm raised to shield his face, the other gripping his blaster though it was half melted from their last fight. The desert roared around them like a living creature. Then the shape emerged through the storm, an enormous construct half buried beneath the dunes. It wasn't Skyclaw, and it wasn't natural. Its metal surface was fused with stone, its sides etched with glowing Ketheri glyphs so ancient they pulsed like veins of light. The machine's topmost section rose and fell with the rhythm of breath, each exhalation releasing gusts that turned the sand to glass. Karen froze. "By the first feather makers." Elias coughed, squinting. "That's breathing." "It is alive," she said, her voice low with awe. "A war sentinel from the first age. My ancestors built them to defend the stars." "Well, good news," he muttered. "Looks like one woke up cranky." The ground shook beneath them as the machine shifted, massive plates grinding together. A beam of white light swept across the dunes, cutting through the storm. When it passed over Karen, her armor responded, ancient circuits flaring in blue patterns. The sentinel's gaze fixed on her instantly. "Oh, that's not good," Elias said. Karen didn't move. "It recognizes my bloodline. It will test me." "Test you how?" The beam hit her square in the chest. The sand exploded beneath her feet, and she was thrown backward, sliding several meters before she could dig her talons into the ground. She staggered up, eyes burning with fierce light. "You run," she said. Elias shook his head. "Not happening. Human, this is not your battle." "Yeah, I've heard that one before." He pulled the last working charge cell from his belt, slotting it into his blaster. "What's the plan?" Karen spread her wings, lightning crawling along the edges of her feathers. "We prove we are still worthy." The sentinel roared, a sound like a mountain tearing open, and fired again. Karen leapt skyward, her injured wing straining against the force but holding. The beam missed her by inches, searing a trench into the sand below. Elias sprinted toward a ridge, diving behind the remains of a shattered turret. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his mind was already calculating angles, distances, the rhythm of the machine's movements. He spotted a cluster of crystalline vents along the sentinel's flank, glowing every time it charged a weapon. "Karen," he shouted through the storm. "Those vents, it's pulling power from them." "I see it," she called back, voice carried on the wind. She dove low, spear aimed like a lightning rod, and struck the first vent dead center. Sparks erupted, the glyphs on the sentinel flickering wildly. It howled again, its voice shaking the desert. Elias used the distraction to climb higher up the ridge, firing shot after shot at the next vent. His aim wasn't perfect, but the blasts weakened the exposed conduits enough for Karen to drive her spear into them moments later. The sentinel shuddered, one of its massive limbs collapsing into the sand. But even wounded, it fought back. Energy surged from its core, forming tendrils of light that lashed at them like whips. One struck Karen square across the wing, sending her crashing down near Elias. He rushed to her side, dragging her behind a half-buried hull fragment. "You okay?" She grimaced, one wing hanging limp. "It will heal. Eventually," he muttered. He glanced over the wreckage. The Sentinel's central core had opened, revealing a blinding sphere of power, its heart, pulsing faster now. "If we can overload that, maybe we can shut it down." Karen looked at him sharply. You would strike a relic of my ancestors. He met her gaze, unflinching. You said it tests you. Looks to me like it's about to win. For a long heartbeat, she said nothing. Then she nodded once. Very well. You take the left approach. I will draw its attention. Before he could argue, she leapt back into the open, wings flaring despite the pain. She shouted something in the old tongue, a challenge lost to time, and the sentinel's head turned toward her instantly. Energy gathered in its maw, ready to fire. Elias sprinted through the storm, sliding down the slope toward the machine's exposed flank. The heat from its core scorched the air, every breath tasting like metal. He reached into his pack, pulled out one of the unstable cells he'd salvaged days earlier, and twisted it until it began to hum with a rising pitch. All right, big guy, he muttered, time for a little human improvisation. He hurled the cell straight into the core. It struck, stuck, and began to glow violently. Karen saw it at the last second. Elias, now. He dove behind a dune as she slammed her spear into the ground, channeling the lightning around her. The world went white. The explosion tore through the sentinel's chest, a column of light piercing the clouds. The shockwave flattened the dunes for miles. When the light faded, only silence remained. The storm had broken apart, scattering across the horizon. The sentinel lay still, half-sunken, its glyphs dim. Karen stood at the crater's edge, wings smoking, feathers torn but eyes blazing. Elias staggered out from the sand, coughing, half-deaf from the blast. He looked up at her and laughed weakly. You're welcome. She tilted her head, still catching her breath. You risked your life for a machine you did not understand. Wouldn't be the first time, he said, collapsing beside her. For a moment, they both watched the dying light of the sentinel fade into the dunes. Karen reached down, touching one of the glyphs as it flickered out. It accepted the test, she whispered. It recognized our fight. Then maybe it realized we're on the same side. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable, then nodded once. Perhaps chaos is another kind of honor. He smiled faintly. Told you. They turned east again, toward the direction of the Skyfong signal, the desert behind them now calm, as if the storm itself bowed to their passage. But far beyond the horizon, hidden from their sight, Talvek watched the aftermath through a distant relay, his talons curling with fury. Let them run, he said softly. Let them think they've won. When they reach the beacon, I will be waiting. The screen went dark. The hunt had only begun. The wreckage of the Sentinel burned behind them for half a day before its light finally faded into the night. The air smelled of scorched ozone and iron. Karen and Elias moved silently across the plains, following the faint pulsing of the Skyfong distress beacon that shimmered through the clouds like a dying star. Every step was heavy. Sand gave way to cracked stone, and the horizon flickered with faint aurora lights from the planet's torn magnetic fields. They didn't speak for hours, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. The silence between them felt earned, forged in fire. When they reached the ridge overlooking the valley, the beacon was there, a metallic spike thrust from the ground, pulsing with a rhythmic blue glow. Around it lay the shattered remains of a Skyfong vessel, torn apart as if something had dragged it down from orbit. Karen's talons clenched. The insignia on the hull bore her clan's mark. It was my squadron, she said softly. We were meant to regroup here. Elias rested his hand on the jagged hull, brushing away dust. Guess Talvek got here first. No, she said, crouching near a blast mark. These wounds, they are old. Weeks, maybe more. Her eyes traced a symbol scorched into the sand beside the wreck, a spiral cut by 3 lines. Her feathers stiffened. This is his sign. He hunts through memory, not mercy. Elias frowned. He's taunting you. Yes, she said. And he knows I will answer. Before Elias could reply, the beacon's pulse quickened. A projection flickered to life above it, a holographic recording. Karan stepped forward as the image sharpened into the face of a male Skyfang, his armor cracked, his feathers burned at the tips. Karan of the Sun Spire, the message began, voice heavy with static. If you see this, we have failed. Talvek commands the fallen sentinels. He seeks the heart forged beneath the ash wastes. Stop him, or our world dies again. The projection stuttered, then collapsed into sparks. Elias stared at the fading light. Heart Forge. The cradle of the first forges. It lies where the storms never end, she said. If Talvek reaches it, he can awaken every sentinel across Kether. The world will burn. Elias rubbed a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. So, same plan as always, get there first, hit it hard, hope we live long enough to regret it. She tilted her head. You say that as if you enjoy it. Wouldn't call it enjoyment, he said with a crooked grin. More like, tradition. A low hum vibrated through the air. Elias froze, scanning the ridge. Shadows moved below, dozens of them. Red optics blinked in the dark, growing brighter. Karen's hand went to her spear. Drones, she hissed. They swarmed up the cliffs, moving with insect precision, metal limbs clicking like teeth. Elias fired first, the shot lighting the valley in a flash. Drones burst apart, their fragments scattering, but more replaced them. Karen launched herself into the air, wing beats stirring dust into a cyclone. Her spear flashed, slicing through machines like glass, but every one she destroyed seemed to call two more from the dark. Too many. Elias shouted. She landed beside him, wings half folded, breathing hard. He knows we found the beacon. This is only the beginning. The ridge trembled. From the shadows below, a shape rose, taller than any drone, cloaked in armor forged from scavenged sentinel plates. The creature's faceplate shifted, revealing gleaming golden eyes and a twisted grin. Talvek. He looked up at them as the wind coiled around his armor. Karen, he said, voice echoing across the valley. You bring a human. How far the proud have fallen. Elias muttered, he's got a great personality. Karen stepped forward, her voice sharp. You desecrate the past with your greed. The sentinels were never meant for your hands. Talvek spread his arms. The past was weak. Our ancestors built gods and then chained them. I will unbind them, and from their ashes, I will make a new age. His gaze shifted to Elias. And you, human, the anomaly. You don't belong to any age. I've seen your kind die screaming under my fleets. What makes you different? Elias smiled faintly. Ask the ones I've buried. Talvek's grin widened. Then let us add your name to their ghosts. He raised his hand. The ground erupted in light. Karen pushed Elias aside as a blast tore through the ridge. Rocks rained from above, and they fell together down the slope, tumbling through smoke and flame. Karen hit first, rolling to her feet, feathers scorched but eyes blazing. Elias stumbled up beside her, coughing. The drones closed in again, encircling them in a tightening ring of red light. Karen spun her spear, wings flaring. We hold here. Elias drew his blaster. Didn't plan on running. The first wave hit them like a tide. Karen moved through it like lightning, her spear cutting arcs of blue across the darkness. Elias fought close, every shot precise, every movement desperate. They fought back to back, metal and fire clashing in the stormlight. Drones exploded, circuits frying, limbs scattering across the sand, but still they came. Then a piercing cry echoed above them. Karen looked up in disbelief. A second Skyfang soared through the storm, wings shining silver. It dove, unleashing a burst of plasma that tore through the enemy ranks. The drones scattered in confusion. The pilot's voice cut through the comms, steady and calm. Karen, stand down. Reinforcements inbound. Karen's breath caught. By the skies, that's Commander Eris. Elias grinned through the smoke. Guess you're not the last of your kind after all. Eris's ship hovered low, bay doors opening. Move. Elias and Karen sprinted through the chaos, diving inside as the ramp closed. Through the viewport, they watched the valley erupt in light as the ship climbed higher, engines howling. Karen pressed her talons to the glass, watching the beacon vanish beneath the dunes. He's heading for the Heart Forge, she said. Eris turned from the controls, his face grim. Then we chase him into the storm. For Kether. For the stars. Elias leaned against the bulkhead, exhaustion etched in his face but a smile tugging at his mouth. And here I thought today was going to be boring. Karen looked at him, feathers rustling faintly, a flicker of something almost like laughter in her eyes. You humans find joy in madness. He shrugged. It's kind of our thing. Outside, lightning split the clouds ahead. The Heart Forge waited beyond the storm, ancient and awake. The storm over the ash wastes was like nothing Elias had ever seen. Lightning carved the sky in patterns that bent reality, striking the same spot over and over as if the world were trying to erase itself. The ship bucked in the turbulence, alarms screaming. Karen gripped the console, shouting coordinates to Eris as the craft dove through spiraling columns of fire and dust. Beneath them, the Heart Forge revealed itself, an enormous labyrinth of metal veins glowing deep beneath the planet's crust, pulsing like a living heart. He's already inside, Karen said, voice tight. The readouts confirmed it, a power signature too large to be anything but Talvek. Eris glanced back at her. You know what awakening the forge will mean. Karen's eyes burned. If he completes the ritual, every sentinel will rise. There will be no Kether left to save. Elias tightened the strap on his harness, grinning faintly. Then we make sure he doesn't get that far. The ship slammed into the outer perimeter, landing hard on a metallic plateau. The ramp dropped into a gale of heat. The three of them stepped out into a world of fire and steel. The ground was alive, runes pulsing underfoot, machinery groaning deep within the crust. Above the chasm, at the forge's center, Talvek stood before a pillar of blinding energy. His armor glowed crimson, veins of molten metal crawling across his form like living lightning. Karen called out, her voice cutting through the roar. Talvek. This ends now. He turned slowly, smiling as if he had expected nothing less. You cannot stop rebirth, Karen. The forge remembers its makers. It welcomes me. You twist its purpose, she spat. I perfect it, he said. He lifted his hand, and the energy surged behind him, taking shape, metal wings unfolding from molten air, forming a colossal construct around him. The sentinels were built to obey. Now they will serve only strength. Eris raised his rifle. Then strength will bury you. Talvek moved first. The blast from his gauntlet tore the air apart. Eris dove aside, firing a volley that shattered harmlessly against the shield of light surrounding him. Karen launched herself upward, lightning gathering in her wings, striking again and again, forcing Talvek's attention skyward. Elias darted between collapsing platforms, searching for any weakness. His eyes caught on the forge's power conduits, streams of pure energy flowing into Talvek's armor. Cut the lines, he shouted. He's drawing from the forge itself. Karen angled down and drove her spear through one of the conduits. The explosion flared white, knocking her from the air, but the connection flickered. Elias ran for the next line, pulling a damaged power cell from his belt. He jammed it into the conduit, the feedback surge lighting the whole chamber in a blinding flash. Talvek roared, staggering. His armor cracked, molten light spilling out like blood. You dare defile the heart. Elias looked up through the heat haze, meeting his gaze. I dare a lot of things. He fired. The blast struck Talvek's chest plate, driving him backward toward the edge of the platform. Karen landed beside Elias, panting, feathers scorched. The forge is destabilizing. We must finish this now. Talvek lunged, faster than thought. His clawed hand struck Karen across the chest, hurling her to the ground. Her spear clattered away, spinning over the edge. He raised his weapon again, ready to strike. Elias threw himself forward, slamming into him. The impact barely moved the Skyfawn warlord, but it was enough to divert the blow. Talvek grabbed him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. You think courage makes you a god? Elias gasped, choking out, no, but it makes me human. He jammed a detonator against the cracked plate over Talvek's heart. The explosion tore through the warlord's chest, sending both of them flying. Elias hit the platform hard, the air ripped from his lungs. The chamber erupted with arcs of unstable energy. Karen rose unsteadily, blood darkening her feathers. She looked at the forge, now collapsing in on itself, and then at Elias lying motionless a few meters away. Rage and grief intertwined into something pure. She spread her wings and screamed, a sound that echoed with the fury of her ancestors. Lightning gathered around her, drawn from the storm above, from the forge below, from every spark that remained in the dying world. She launched herself at Talvek, spearless but unyielding. He rose to meet her, molten armor melting away in the surge. Their collision shook the entire chamber. Lightning and fire twisted together in a spiral of destruction. For a moment, their forms were lost in blinding light. When the storm cleared, Karen stood over the fallen warlord. His armor was shattered, his eyes dim. She knelt beside him. You could have saved them, she whispered. He smiled faintly. I saved myself. His eyes flickered once, then went dark. Karen turned toward Elias. He stirred, coughing weakly. She rushed to him, supporting his head as he blinked through the smoke. Still alive? She asked softly. He smiled, eyes unfocused. Define alive. A low rumble shook the ground. The forge's core was collapsing. Eris stumbled toward them, shouting over the roar. We need to leave, now. Karen helped Elias to his feet. The three of them ran through the burning corridor, chased by collapsing platforms and bursts of fire. The exit loomed ahead, light spilling through the storm outside. They dove through just as the forge imploded, a column of light shooting into the sky. The shockwave carried them across the plateau. When it was over, they lay in silence beneath a sky finally free of lightning. The storms had cleared, revealing 1,000 unfamiliar stars. Elias sat up slowly, looking at the distant horizon. Is it over? Karen looked at the fading glow where the forge had been. No more sentinels will rise. Kether breathes again. Eris stood nearby, watching the dawn. Then our dead can rest. Elias chuckled quietly. Guess we did it. Karen turned to him, studying his face, the dust, the burns, the stubborn spark still burning in his eyes. You fell from the sky with no weapon, no armor, no plan, she said. And somehow, you changed everything. He smiled tiredly. It's kind of what we do. For a long moment, they simply watched the sunrise paint the ruins in gold. The wind carried the scent of cooling metal, the faint hum of life returning to a wounded world. Karen stood, extending a hand to him. Then stay, human. Help us rebuild what we nearly lost. He took her hand, rising beside her. Mind if I join the fight? She smiled, wings catching the first light of dawn. You already have. The storm was gone. The world, for the first time in centuries, was quiet. And somewhere in that silence, the future began.